by Sheehy.
I guess I better start. The clock's going. Good evening. As Mayor Finley stated in November, we're doing a good job at managing growth. Our policy has generally met its intent to scale back growth and restrain our student population, but just barely. We remain on the verge of schools bursting at the seams, and we can't afford to stretch the growth policy beyond this intent. You must rely on sufficiently complete and wholly accurate information to make your decisions. In the case of these two proposals, I believe you've been offered incomplete, misleading, and even false information. Case in point, I'm 55, and I've got 2 kids in Madison City Schools until 2025. Despite suggesting that Barnett's Crossing will be a 55 and over community, there's absolutely nothing in the development agreement that prohibits school-age children. This is a simple fact of how federal law is written. Unless this is a 62 or older community, the Housing for Older Persons Act permits school-age children to live in age-restricted communities unless specific restrictions are imposed by community regulation and bound by the developer agreement. The Bella Woods developer claimed his development agreement precludes building additional houses if fewer were built in prior phases, but that's absolutely false. There's a provision in both agreements that permits catch-up construction. In fact, there are even provisions to exceed the phasing limits. I'm going to hold comments on the next 2 slides until the hearings for those respective properties. Please proceed to slide 5 of your charts in front of you. There reportedly was daylight between school leadership and the data that projects student populations relative to school capacity, resulting in a belief that the schools can absorb virtually any influx of students. This also is false. School leadership has affirmed their agreement with the data. School leaders also agree that we'll run out of elementary space by 2026 unless we find solutions. If we add 400 elementary seats by then, for which we don't have money, it only buys 2 years until we need another elementary school, for which we also don't have any appropriated funds. School leaders believe we can mitigate the high school demand through hybrid learning and expanded dual enrollment with potential net savings of 20%, nearly an entire grade. This is not yet modeled, and it is ambitious, but we do have some little time to work it. On these charts, red is bad, but yellow is still not good. Our class sizes and other conditions will remain stressed. So even with best case scenarios and mitigations, we'll need new additions and new schools. The premise that our road capacities are adequate to support these developments is further illusion. Our transportation master plan is rife with artificially inflated input and commensurately incorrect output. You know from personal experience that the transportation reports claim that there is no congestion anywhere in Madison except a small stretch of Highway 72 is false. This slide's an example of that. The West Side Master Plan requires proof of adequate mobility and connectivity prior to rezoning or subdivision approval. The top image of this slide shows what Huntsville Brown Ferry is supposed to look like, and below is how it really is. The top image on this slide shows what Hardeman is supposed to look like, and the photo shows how it really is. Notice in the photo the red circles, and the narrow width of the road creates a safety hazard as the yellow truck passes, nearly clipping mailboxes and garbage cans, while also nearly forcing oncoming traffic off the road. Imagine that were a school bus. This slide shows in red the programmed end state of our West Side Master Plan. The yellow band shows the managed growth of our growth policy. The black band shows where Bella Woods and Barnett's Crossing lie, outside the scope of both plan and policy. The West Side Master Plan states that plans are only as good as their implementation, and that the West Side Master Plan should be used to guide rezoning and annexation decisions. This is not something that is just a continuous improvement recommendation or need. Quality growth management is an immediate need. These cases demonstrate that there are policy deficiencies that can and must be addressed before we make precedent-setting decisions that adversely impact our community and in at least one case permanently deprive us of revenue-generating land. If we're not in alignment with our plan and policy, then why are we doing it? We can either make a decision to approve rezonings that are founded on false premises, or we can make the perhaps difficult but right call to disapprove them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. Good evening again. Barnett's Crossing is an open field with scant tree lines beyond a creek and in a flood zone. It protects no canopy, or for that matter, wetland or creek bed, not already protected better with current or master planning zone, or West Side Master Plan zoning. Our policy permits development of single-family homes only for single lots that are infill to age-restricted housing. Exactly how is 53% of the development considered single lot infill to the 47% land for age-restricted housing? It doesn't meet the growth policy intent. This proposal will bring in 181 homes instead of 17 permitted by our West Side Master Plan. And coincidentally, just like Kaiser, this would put purported senior housing along railroad tracks and inside a flight zone that violates the FAA acoustics threshold of 55 LDN. But as I already indicated, it is not age-restricted housing. There's no conflict of data in my charts. The facts are in our final signed products, and I can show you specifically where those are. So if you're looking through my charts, and I only mentioned a couple of them in my comments, but throughout the chart you'll see other information that I've called out that there is a conflict with in your decision for the information and data that you guys rely on for your decision making. So how do we know if our azimuth is straight and our pace is on tempo with these decisions? Look at our plans and our policy. Again, the decisions we make now are irrevocable and irrecoverable. We will set legally binding precedent and implant residential growth patterns that we cannot later redirect for revenue generating sources. How many times have you looked at decisions and actions your predecessors took long ago that we're now stuck with and think, boy, I wish they'd been more diligent in this? We have an opportunity and an obligation to do this right. This is not just about schools, it's about roads, as Ms. Beebe indicated, it's about our emergency services, our budget, and our vision for the city. Those are codified in our West Side Master Plan to a large extent, and to our policies. It represents the integrity of our system and the protection of the totality of our city's interests. Thank you again.
Yes, sir.
Jason, would you kindly bring up Mike Sheehy's slides again? Mike Sheehy, 108 Foxfield Drive. Thanks for that reminder, Mr. Spencer. So I feel a little bit silly because I was out there in the audience waving my hand when Mary Beth was up speaking. I was reflecting back on our time at the work session that we had, and the desire from the public to be able to engage in dialogue there, and we weren't permitted, and I understand that. That's a work session for you all. But the reflection is that you guys were asking for information and data that would help inform your decision-making process. And as I mentioned earlier, you're relying on information and data from, as another member of the audience mentioned, not just staff, but from developers and builders and sometimes realtors out there. The developers, builders, and realtors have a vested interest in this, of course. They're not here to talk out against their product. They're here to sell their product. We're not here to talk out against their products either. I've attended planning commission meetings. I remember one with Mr. Enfinger a number of years ago, and he came to council for one of his developments, and he said, I'm here dancing to your tune. What else do you want me to do? And I'll do it. We support growth. Please don't, listen and hear. We support growth. We support managed growth. And I think I've heard every single one of you say the exact same thing. We support smart managed growth. That's all that we're asking for. But when we don't get an opportunity, the staff and the developers tend to, especially the staff, always tend to get the developer, get the last word on things. The public comes up and gives their comments, and then the staff has an opportunity to come up, and I would say, I don't mean to put this in a bad way, but for lack of a better word, put their spin on things. And when we're talking about things like the developers agreement and in relation to the age restrictions and things like that, that's where you saw me jumping up and down in my seat. The staff and the developers and the builders and the realtors aren't the only subject matter experts on these things. We've got multiple lawyers in the audience, sitting right here. You've got other people that have been involved in municipal planning at strategic and operational levels for decades. We have expertise that you can draw upon and ask upon also. I would ask of you, when there's an issue that you believe that we might have a valuable perspective to offer, a factual, valuable perspective, feel free to call upon us as well. Otherwise, you'll see me jumping up and down in my seat a lot. In any case, getting off of that, schools and data on the schools. I do want to talk to that a little bit. Mr. Shaw, you and I had spoken previously about your conversation with Dr. Nichols. So I did go to meet with Dr. Nichols after that conversation because I wanted to clarify. As I mentioned with you, if there's a gap between the data, what the data is telling us about when we're going to reach capacity, and what school officials are telling us, well, then we've got to reconcile that. The data was formed by the first Growth Impact Committee study. It was informed by an update to that. So 2 reports by the Growth Impact Committee that included experts like Dr. Johnson, Mike Potter, and others. A lot of smart people studied that and gave us that data. Then it was done at the beginning of this year by GMC that validated that data. It was almost identical. All of the projections have proven true. And if somebody is challenging that data, well, then let's go reconcile that. So I did, and Ms. Lear accompanied me. And we went and met with Dr. Nichols, and he said, no, I did not say I can take anything you can throw at us. He said, what I said is I can take managed growth. He actually brought up a number. He said, if we pace it, which is what our growth policy is supposed to do, if we pace it, I can get up to probably a total number of 25,000 rooftops. I can't go beyond that, but it's got to be paced, and that's what our growth policy is supposed to do. That's what our West Side Master Plan is supposed to do. And I put up that chart that showed that these developments are outside of that West Side Master Plan. At the Planning Commission, Mike Potter asked the question. I was there. John Seifert was there. I was there too. And Mary Beth can attest to this and tell me if I'm wrong. At the Planning Commission, Mike Potter asked the question, were these numbers included in the Growth Impact Committee projections? The answer, the staff answer, was yes. The real answer is no, because they weren't on the West Side Master Plan to be developed this way. There were a couple of houses for this particular development, but not in the quantity and the scope that we are now, and there was nowhere near the number of houses in the other development. So, again, we got to peel back the onion, and if somebody gives an answer, I got to tell you, I'm from whatever the state that is, the show me state. Show me where in law it says we can't do that. Show me where in the developer agreement it says that, and understand these things. The developer agreement, in fact, with one of you, I had an exchange. You said 100%. It's got to be age restricted, 55 and over. Well, when you look at the federal law, that's not what it says. And if it's not in our developer agreement, we are not bound to it. We cannot control what they put in the CC&Rs. That was a sample. That was an example. That wasn't even a draft. That was an example CC&R presented for that development. I need to get onto this development. I'm sorry. But I do want to tell you, I met with Dr. Nichols. I subsequently said, well, let me bounce this off Mr. Holtkamp, who is the school board president. He said the same thing as Dr. Nichols. We have got to phase this. We've been doing a great job phasing it with our growth policy. If we adhere to the growth policy and consistent with the master plan, we'll be okay. But we're at the threshold. The data shows us we're at the threshold. And even if we do the things that we're talking about, as I mentioned earlier, our classroom sizes are maxed out. Our student-to-teacher ratios are maxed out. We're still underfunded. I can't remember if it was earlier this year. I think it was probably last year. The schools actually created a GoFundMe account to fund required commitments. A GoFundMe account. The schools have a huge budget, but it's saddled by debt. I want to say I might be wrong on this, and maybe Ms. Spears or Ms. Bartlett could contest. I want to say 1/3 of the school budget is saddled by facility debt, and I might be wrong on that. So we've got a large budget, but we've got nothing to do with it, and it's not enough to pay for our required expenses. We got the PTA funding radios for the SROs. We got the schools putting out GoFundMe accounts for other purposes that are required things. And then we're paying for every single thing that we do as a parent for every extracurricular activity we got going with our kids, some of them the fees for standard classes. So this is not just an issue about schools, but the schools are on the threshold, and we can't ignore that. And Dr. Nichols isn't here tonight. I could call him on speed dial. Mr. Holtkamp's not here tonight. I could call him on speed dial. But they're going to tell you exactly what I told you, because I did, Mr. Shaw. I did go back to reconcile that with them. And they're not opposed to growth either, just like none of us in the audience. We just want to make sure that we're doing it the right way. Bella Woods, and to show you on the map here, Bellwoods presumes to fall under the growth policy provision that permits rezoning if we're protecting a tree canopy. The policy doesn't state whether the canopy should be 100 trees, 10 trees, or just one tree. But in this case, it's a moot point. There isn't a single tree that will be protected on any buildable property. This is wide open farmland. The only trees are behind a creek, in a flood zone, and in a space designated to be a park and natural area. Those trees aren't going anywhere regardless of zoning, and it's a farce to suggest otherwise. This RC2 development injects a higher density of housing than even RC1 would do. Why would we do that? Houses encroach into the flood zone. If you've looked at the planning, the staff reports, the houses actually encroach into the flood zone. The proposal converts proposed zoning that was to include commercial and other uses. Look at the missed commercial opportunities from the huge Holiday Road intersection on the fourth graphic to the right. It's got that square there. That's the intersection with Holiday Road. That's a huge commercial opportunity that we're missing out on. That's boundless growth, and we're just giving it up. It's zoned right now to have commercial property in there, but we're throwing that zoning away. So again, I ask, if it doesn't legitimately align with our plans and policy,
Huntsville.
then why the heck are we doing it?
That's Huntsville.
It's in Huntsville, right?
That is Huntsville, but what I'm saying is that's a couple hundred meters down the road, and our property frontage there is supposed to be mixed use district, which includes commercial activity, and we're just giving all that up. We're giving it all to Huntsville. We're putting in all their houses, and they're building all the businesses. And we all know Huntsville Brown Ferry, regardless how it looks now, it's supposed to be that big open road, and we're just giving up a lot of opportunity. There's going to be a huge amount of cross traffic there. So again, I would ask, if it doesn't legitimately align with the plan and policy, then why the heck are we doing it? We are not pacing anything. We might as well throw the plan and policy out. So I just want to show one last thing here, and this is where I should have ended up when I was talking about legitimate application policy. We're not just talking about schools. We're talking about the road capacities. They're not there yet. We're talking about the emergency services. And I understand they can meet the mission. I've been there. I used to be the director of emergency services on the Arsenal and at other places around the world. They will find a way to meet the mission, but it's going to strain them. And the West Side Master Plan knows we need another fire station out west. We got to move. I can't remember if it's Station 3, and then we've got to build a permanent station out there. That infrastructure is not in place yet. And when you call 911 and you want them to be there in 5 minutes to get you out of the house before it burns down, you better hope you can get there in 5 minutes. And I can tell you that some of these properties don't meet, well, I can't say they don't meet that standard. I know Chief Bailey and Chief Jernigan will find a way to make that happen, but it's going to strain them. They're going to need more officers, they're going to need more vehicles, and they're going to need more stationing.
Is this still under 3 minutes right now, Chief Bailey? Is that what our average response time is? Didn't you say like 2.48 or something? Or am I, was that was?
Yeah, that's pretty darn impressive, I got to tell you. So, but again, the point isn't solely about schools. It's about the roads. You've seen what the roads look like. You've seen what they're supposed to look like. They are not there. It's about the economic impact. It's about the totality of things. We focus a lot on the schools, and I would tell you, as most of the people, we know the schools are the heartbeat of our community. I don't think that everybody agrees that we're strained and that we're risk on that, but we're putting ourselves at increased risk if we don't stick with the growth policy, stick with the plan. So I would just ask you, all of you in the recent elections made a commitment to smart growth. And I think there were two that didn't, and I know there were two that didn't, but they made commitments to the things that develop smart growth. So I would just ask that we, again, does it meet the letter and intent of the plan? Does it meet, and they don't in this case, does it meet the letter and intent of policy in this case? No. So with that, again, I just ask you to renew your commitment to smart growth. And I close by wishing you a blessed Christmas and holiday season for all. Thank you very much.